Hello everyone, and welcome back to Turkish series Stars. I hope your day is unfolding with warmth, clarity, and the kind of small moments that turn into cherished memories. Today we set out on a heartfelt journey together, one that asks us to pause, breathe, and listen to a story capable of tugging the threads that hold us together as people. It's a story about love as a force that reshapes the landscape of our lives, love that doesn't just cross barriers but dismantles them. The idea itself sounds grand, but stay with me, by the end, you'll feel why it matters. If you love stories like this, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that each new chapter we share finds its way to you without fail. Our focus this time is on two names that already live in the collective memory of anyone who follows Turkish television, Hazal and Çağatay Ulusoy. Imagine them not as headlines, not as characters seen from a distance, but as two people whose paths were never supposed to meet in a way that would change them so profoundly. Two orbits, distinct and steady, each certain of its own gravity, and then, somewhere along the way, an invisible pull guiding them toward the same center. Call it destiny if you like, call it timing, call it love. The result is the same, a connection that refuses to fade. This is not a glitter-soaked fairy tale stitched with perfect pictures and flawless answers. It's a living account of resilience, an earnest chronicle of how two people learned to stand side by side when life pressed down hardest, and how that support became the scaffolding for a shared world. In that world, they laughed, worried, disagreed, dreamed, and dared. And in daring together, they discovered a strength that neither had quite found alone. Hazal's early years under the spotlight were as promising as they were demanding. The rush of attention could be intoxicating, but it was also heavy, with all the scrutiny the public eye can bring. There were seasons when she felt the weight of expectations, when even her smile had to be strong enough to survive the storms brewed by strangers. Yet there was always a spark in her, a steady flame that refused to go out. That flame made her persistent, careful, and wise beyond her years, but it also gave her an armor, a graceful reserve that safeguarded the softest parts of her heart. Çağatay, though he arrived from a different corner of the same universe, faced his own quiet battles. Fame teaches you how to speak loudly, but it does not teach you how to rest. He knew the pressure of reinvention and the eerie silence that falls after applause. He knew how to carry worries without advertising them. Beneath his calm, there lived a sensitivity that recognized subtle feelings before they were named, an instinct that could read the room and catch what wasn't being said. So how did their roads converge? Not with fireworks, and not on a red carpet. It was work that first pulled them into a shared frame, a project that asked for trust, discipline, and countless hours of proximity. The kind of proximity that chips away at masks. In the brightness of set lights and the hush that follows cut, in the long pauses between scenes and the glances exchanged at the monitor, they noticed something familiar in each other's eyes. It wasn't instant surrender, it was gentle awareness. The sort that says, I know that kind of tired. I know that kind of hope. And then came the walls. Not the cartoonish kind that fall in one strike, but the everyday kind that rise quietly. There were emotional walls built by experience and self-protection. There were social walls formed by commentary and expectation. There were walls crafted from fear, fear of misreading a moment, fear of inviting a storm, fear of losing oneself in the attempt to hold someone else. The industry brings its own barricades too, schedules, whispers, distance, the relentless conversation around them that often speaks without listening at all. Yet when Hazal and Çağatay really began to see each other, they stopped staring at the walls and started noticing their seams. Little cracks of light. Tiny proofs that no barrier is perfect when patience is present. They were careful and deliberate. They didn't rush a feeling that needed time to breathe. Instead, they chose to communicate, not as a performance, but as a promise. He listened to the delicate details she offered about her past and present, not racing to fix her, not turning her heart into a puzzle. He offered space and sincerity, and in return she let her guard shift, inch by inch. She listened to his unvoiced doubts, the ones that settle at the base of the ribs, heavy and quiet. She became the place where he didn't have to pretend. Their love was never passive. It showed up in the small hours, in the reminders, in the unglamorous interludes that don't make photo spreads. It was insistently active, building, encouraging, nudging. Maybe there was a project Hazal had tucked away, a dream she'd grown too polite to demand from life. He saw it, named it, and held the door open while she walked through. Maybe there was a role Çağatay had hesitated to chase, a fear humming in the background that he wasn't ready to face a different kind of scrutiny. She steady-handed him past the noise, reminding him of the quiet truth he'd known before the world spoke over it. They had hard days. Love that looks effortless has usually survived effort. There were disagreements, long silences that could have become long distances, and moments when both felt stretched thin by separate obligations. What set them apart was not a lack of struggle, but what they did with it. They learned the choreography of compromise. They practiced speaking plainly, even when the words were uncomfortable. They trained themselves to stand on opposite sides of a question without forgetting they were on the same side of the life they were building. If you listen closely, you'll notice the hum of admiration underneath everything. She admired his steadiness, the way he could anchor a room with calm, the way he sought the best in people even when that search looked naive to others. He admired her fire, her refusal to shrink when shadows lengthened, her ability to treat softness like a strength rather than a liability. That admiration wasn't decorative, it was fuel. It powered apologies, lifted heavy days, and made generosity their default setting. Of course, their circles had opinions. Family and friends watch with love, which often looks like caution. It's natural to evaluate a bond that seems to place two already public souls inside another spotlight. There were raised brows, protective pauses, and questions phrased as advice. But time tells the truth that hurried judgment can't. With time, those closest to them saw the lift rather than the burden, the rise in confidence, the ease around each other, the way their laughter sounded deeper and their silence less lonely. Skepticism softened into support, and support matured into pride. What can we draw from their journey? Not a formula, because real lives don't fold into neat steps. But we can gather a few bright threads. Empathy mattered, the daily practice of asking, "How did that feel for you?" Vulnerability mattered, the courageous act of telling the full story instead of a tidy fragment. Patience mattered, the kind that understands people bloom at their own pace. And unwavering support mattered most of all, the steadfast presence that celebrates triumphs and tends to bruises without tallying favors. Look at how love altered the lens. It didn't erase hardship, but it reframed it, the way morning light can make a familiar room look new. It gave them a horizon to share, a place to point their separate efforts and call it ours. It made them braver individually because they were anchored collectively. So many of us search for that, not someone to save us, but someone to stand with us while we save ourselves. If you've ever wondered whether a bond can withstand the noise of the world, consider the choices they kept making. They kept choosing conversation over assumption, gentleness over winning, presence over performance. They built rituals, coffee before dawn flights, a text that said "I'm here" without needing to say it, a habit of naming gratitude out loud so it wouldn't go unnoticed. They let each other change. So many loves falter not because people change, but because they're not allowed to. Hazal and Çağatay gave each other permission to evolve, and then they stayed curious about the person they were witnessing. And yes, there were setbacks that could have hardened them. The projects that didn't land. The headlines that tried to tell their story without asking for the facts. The periods of distance that measured time in rehearsals and rewrites and reshoots. But with every stumble, they pulled back to that first quiet agreement: speak, listen, trust, try again. Eventually, the walls that once looked unscalable turned into backdrops, parts of the scenery rather than the stage. As their bond deepened, it didn't isolate them, it amplified their compassion. They became better friends, truer collaborators, more patient colleagues. Admiration at home bled into generosity at work, and their presence in a room made it easier for others to take chances. That's the quiet miracle of real connection. It doesn't just transform the two who share it. It spreads outward like light through an open door. So here we are, holding their story up to the light, not as a perfect example, but as a hopeful one. The message is plain. Love that does the work can shift our internal weather. It can turn panic into perspective, shame into courage, silence into understanding. It can teach us to see the cracks not as evidence of failure, but as proof that nothing built by fear is built to last. Today we've walked through the path Hazal, Kaya and Çağatay Ulusoy carved together, the meeting that didn't need fireworks to be meaningful, the slow removal of the bricks they'd each learned to stack for safety, the practice of talking honestly, the habit of admiring loudly, the courage to be vulnerable and the insistence on being kind. We've watched how their connection didn't just brighten their individual journeys but offered a blueprint for anyone willing to build with care. Thank you for sharing this time with us at Turkish Series Stars. Your presence here turns these narratives from monologues into conversations. I'd love to know which part of Hazal and Çağatay's story settled deepest in you. Was it the patience, the communication, the quiet faith that the other would show up? Share your reflections in the comments. We read them, we learn from them, and we're grateful for them. If this story moved you, give it a like and pass it along to someone who could use a little light today. And if you're new here and want more stories that remind us what we're capable of when we choose each other, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. We'll be back soon with another chapter, another reminder that even in a world that can feel cold and hurried, there are still connections being built with tenderness and effort. Until then, take care of your heart, look for the cracks where light can enter, and trust that love, when nourished, really can take down any wall that stands in its way.